Hi everyone. So we're good to start with the next session. I'm Inderpreet Kaur. I'm an analyst with OpenStack, and this talk will provide you an overview of what is happening with cloud and AI in mobile networks. So I'll be talking about perhaps from the perspective of 4G, 5G networks, and just to set the perspective, telcos have had a challenge growing their revenues. So if we see the annual mobile service revenue growth, 1.3% in 2024, the mobile subscription growth of 4.7% in 2024, and yet with a growth in the traffic, a very high growth on the mobile traffic. So the monetization has always remained a challenge for telcos. Your subscription growth and your traffic growth doesn't always reflect back into the revenue growths. So as telcos move from 5G to 5G SA, they are taking some initiatives to address these challenges. One is on the service innovation side, other is on the operational improvement side. So when we talk about service innovation, if we compare it with a typical 4G or 5G network perhaps, we never heard of, or most of the time telcos have provided connectivity with best effort performance or QoS guarantees. But if we talk about 5G SA and service innovation, telcos are taking into consideration in terms of providing guaranteed QoS and SLAs to their customers. So that's one of the ways they are innovating. The other way is they are integrating AI into your common services. For example, voice is a common service. How can you enhance it with the help of AI? So there's one example which helps LGU Plus bundles an app which helps the customer detect any fraud in real time over a voice call. And there are other services like you can have a real-time translation of the voice call service. And then there is data prioritization that is mostly tied to slicing use cases. You can set a specific slice for delivering, a specific QoS or specific requirement for any use case. This is mostly relevant to people who are either doing mobile gaming, and in the instant they need better connectivity or better bandwidth to have a better enhanced experience. So that's happening on the service innovation side. On the operational innovation side, it's about how are you managing your network operations more efficiently and how are you improving your customer engagement. So network operations, mostly people talk about how you're increasing the level of automation on the networks from level, there are different levels defined by TM Forum 0 to 5, and most of the networks, they are at level 2 today. But if you have to enhance that from level 3, level 4, or level 5 onwards, that involves a lot of AI or use of agentic AI. The other example is how you can innovate on the customer engagement side. So these are some of the ways what telcos are trying or to do in 5G SA or even 5G networks. So what does that mean? In terms of the requirements from these networks, telco networks have to be more resilient, autonomous, and capable of delivering intelligence. Now, if we look at cloud and AI, it can deliver on these requirements. For instance, when we talk about cloud, we talk about cloud native or containerized network functions. And cloud native or containers by default have the capability of providing you scalability, or Kubernetes has this capability of delivering you self-healing or automatically recovering your failed clusters. On the autonomous side, there are different lens to it, making things declarative. So now telcos have always set up their networks in an imperative way, which means you code things into the network. You use scripts to do that, but then from an imperative way, because of the complexity of the services that are involved with 5G SA, or because of the complexity of how 5G cloud native networks are designed, imperative was not always a good choice of doing things. So you're moving into a declarative way where you do not want to, where you can just define what you want to achieve, and the system should achieve that for you. And that's where GitOps or some of the other cloud native constructs or principles come into play, which is helping you to move from imperative to declarative and intent-based networks. Then you're talking about AI in terms of achieving event-driven closed-loop orchestration. So now you can always achieve automation with rule-based logic, but if you want to make it more dynamic in nature, you can implement AI, or you can use AI to make it more dynamic in nature. Intelligence, if you talk about AI/ML, or the use of agentic stuff, which again is a very broad spectrum. You can start with your data schemas, or looking at making your data AI ready first, and then perhaps looking at what you can do with that AI ready data, what you can do with LLMs, agentic stuff, and then multi-agent orchestration. Although all of this is not true today, but it is like where you're moving towards, or what you're trying to achieve. So in terms of cloud native, where we are today, so this is a survey that Omdia does every year, and this gives us a sense of telcos would want to move most of their network functions into a software-based deployment, or softwareized world. So if you know telcos from the background, they have always deployed physical network functions, which is like a specifically designed equipment to conduct a specific operation. But then a couple of years back, they started moving and started decoupling your hardware and software and making it into a virtual world. And now they're trying to move it into a containerized world. And this shows the progress on that. Today there's a lot of still appliance-based deployments in the networks, but eventually, gradually, if you look at 5 years from now, about 70% of the network will be either in terms of virtualized network running in VMs, and then or on the containerized network, which is your Kubernetes platforms. So this is just to emphasize that for a telco, VMs and containers are going to coexist. There are certain benefits that OpenStack would bring in, and there are certain benefits that Kubernetes would bring in. So telcos will have to rely on both. And this is just an example of what some of the survey results have shown. So we asked the telcos what best describes your organization strategy for migrating the packet core from 4G to 5G SA. And there is a considerable emphasis on keeping the existing 4G VM-based infrastructure and then co-building your 5G core network alongside that infrastructure. Then again, in terms of, we asked another question, how are you hosting the containerized network functions today and in 5 years? Now you can have the containers deployed directly on the bare metal, or you can have them running over a virtual, or packed in a virtual machine and running over the infrastructure. So both are going to stay in terms of 5 years down the line. The next thing is in terms of cloud native. So traditionally telcos have always relied on purpose-built specific tools for managing, orchestrating these network functions or these pieces of elements. But if you move towards a cloud native, so cloud native is not just a shift in your infrastructure, but it's also a shift in how you are managing, operating that infrastructure, which is if you want to rely on GitOps and how you're managing your software on top through CI/CD pipelines. So again, we ask telecom operators, are you or when will you be implementing CI/CD and GitOps for the management of your 5G core? And it's only 22% who are doing it today, but if you look at next 12 months, it will be about 50%. So maybe telcos are a little behind the other industries in terms of adopting these new technologies, but it's happening. The shift is gradually happening as more and more operators are moving towards 5G, which is containerized, and then they are using container cloud native constructs to manage that infrastructure. Now coming to the use of AI. As I mentioned earlier, AI is something which operators are looking into in terms of improving their operations, and network is one of the top use cases for them. So we asked the telcos what are the top use cases where they would want to add the AI capabilities in next 12 months, and network optimization, network automation, and traffic management are the top 3 use cases. Surprisingly, network slicing was not on top. Perhaps it's a global survey, and network slicing is not mature, equally in every geography. So, then AI is discussed a lot, but is AI sufficient alone to drive towards the type of networks telcos want to operate? And we asked again from another survey, which are the most important enablers for telcos to achieve autonomous networks state. And I think alongside AI, which includes generative AI and agentic AI approaches, telcos highlighted that intent-based orchestration is important, standardization of APIs is important. Data quality, data governance is also very important. I think in a lot of talks I hear telcos still talking about how are they dealing with their data, how are they making that data ready to be used by the generative and agentic AI systems.
Okay.
Now, the impact of AI on telco networks. In today's situation, when most of the applications are ChatGPT type or the chatbot types. So if we can see from the graph, these are temporary spikes in the traffic that they create on your network. And these could be addressed with the telco's existing networks. But if you talk about agentic use cases, that's where the traffic profile is expected to change. Because these are agents talking to each other constantly behind the scenes, and that will create a constant amount of traffic on your networks, which will require some attention. So as you move into the future, if you deploy more agentic applications, if your consumers are using more agentic applications, then you'll have to think about balancing between 3 key aspects of your cloud networks or cloud native networks. First is the bandwidth, the latency, and the compute. So there's a lot of discussion that what happens for telcos, where do they deploy the compute? Do they deploy more compute, or should they just let it be like this? So I think it will depend from use case, and it will also depend on how you triage between these 3 things. So adding more compute may not be the right answer all the time. It will depend on what sort of bandwidth the application demands and what sort of latency the application demands. So how telcos are handling some of the AI requirements from networking and compute perspective. This is a very simple use case. Some of the telcos are deploying the services for fraud detection in terms of voice calls, and what they basically do is they read the traffic from your IMS infrastructure and they put it into, or they run it through the AI ML model, which in real time detects if there is any anomaly or there is anything wrong in the patterns. So if there is anything wrong in the pattern, it again in the real time takes an action. So from this, I guess there are three things that this has an implication, or it implies. It has to have, if you're implementing such a solution, you need to have a high capacity server, because you're talking about handling hundreds and thousands of transactions per second. It has to offer actionable decisions in milliseconds. Now this is characterizing the need for low latency for such applications. And then it also characterizes, there's an AI/ML model which is continuously learning, updating itself, and demanding higher compute resources as it does that. So that's how we are doing it today. How do we want to address some of this in future? Perhaps now it's very typical of telcos to always deploy different resource pools for different type of workloads they are addressing. So when telcos were in a world of VMs, they created separate resource pools for those VMs, and when they tried migrating to containerized, they deployed separate resource pools for containerized network functions. So there's a lot of resource wastage there, because you cannot share networking, you cannot share storage between these two different resource pools. And likewise, if telcos are considering addressing the AI problem in the same sense, then it might be living the same story again. So you need to think about, when you think about your telco cloud for addressing AI workloads, think about having a common integrated resource pool that could address your AI, CNF, VNF, and other type of workloads. Also think about having a consistent framework for AI. And as it has happened with telcos, they've always had different automation tools or different network management solutions for different domains and different problems. And in a similar manner, they are evolving when they are using agentic AI or in these. And what happens is that every AI ML piece of code will also have its own life cycle. You cannot have, you need to think about it in a consistent way. Can you have a common framework which can address the life cycle management of your agent or your or the model that you have deployed? So you need to have a common framework for deploying these resources, and then think about the security and trust across the AI/ML pipeline. Now that's very typical in a telco environment. You're relying a lot on third-party model providers, which is a model is somewhere outside of your footprint. This typically brings in a very key issue for them, which is about data governance, data sovereignty. How do you want to address that? Not just that, in terms of can you trust the model which you're trained with your data? Is it not being tempered by a third party, or is it not being tempered outside of your environment? So these are some of the issues that you need to keep in mind when you think about future considerations that you design your telco cloud network. I think that's all the slides that I have. Thank you so much for your time. If there are any questions, so.
For telecom operator, you get the statistic